Hello, lovely friend. I am Dr. Mary Barson.
And I'm Dr. Lucy Burns.
We are doctors
and weight management and metabolic health experts.
And this is the Real Health and Weight Loss Podcast. Hello, lovely friend, and welcome to this episode of the Real Health and Weight Loss Podcast. Dr. Mary here on what is a probably disappointingly cool December day here, but I am joined by the beautiful and lovely sunny Dr. Lucy. How are you, lovely Dr. Lucy?
Oh, I am super, Mares. And when you say sunny, it reminds me of my new puppy who we have named Sunny in some encouragement to the weather gods to provide a bit more sun down in Melbourne. But it is so interesting looking at her as a puppy, and she's learning and growing. And the thing with her training is that we have to be so consistent. So she's currently in a little bit of a biting phase, which is a normal puppy behavior. It's just that when her teeth wrap around my hand, not so helpful. And I did a little bit of research on how to train a dog. We've had lots of dogs before. Not all of them have been particularly well trained. And, current research suggests that, yelling at your dog is not helpful, which, deep down, we probably all know yelling doesn't actually ever achieve anything. And what you need to do with this particular dog with puppies is redirect. So you provide them a safe alternative for their chewing. But the key is to be consistent. If you don't do it consistently, they get confused. They don't know what to do. And humans are exactly the same.
Oh, aren't we though? Aren't we? And consistency, although easy to say, not necessarily easy to implement.
Not always, no.
We all know this, that doing the small helpful things consistently, it's like that, the drip, drip, drip that can move entire continents. Like you can powerfully shift your health with small, consistent changes, either for powerfully good or for powerfully bad. But we actually just need to do the helpful, small, consistent changes to get those benefits that we want. It's a beautiful analogy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes for people it can be hard because there's so much information out there and it's confusing and it's conflicting, and people are, seeing, everywhere. We don't have an information drought. We have an information flood, and
yes,
trying to work out how do I apply that information to my particular circumstance can paralyze people sometimes with overwhelm. They don't want to do the wrong thing, and so they can sometimes do nothing.
Absolutely. I don't think there'd be anybody who would argue that, some regular movement is one of those little consistent things that you can do that will drastically improve your health. But even that is a minefield. There is so much noise out there. And our topic for today is, I have to have that post-workout protein shake? Because there's a lot of noise out there that tells you that you absolutely must, and that you cannot exercise fasted, and that you have to have protein immediately after you eat. Problem is that most of the advice, particularly the advice online, is built around bodybuilders and athletes, and it's not designed for, busy women just trying to improve their metabolic health, just trying to lose weight, trying to be healthy, just for the everyday mortals trying to do the right thing for their health. Following the advice that's given to bodybuilders or athletes is not necessarily going to be helpful at all.
No, and I think that is the number one crucial thing, that we need to make sure that we are not taking science that is based in performance and performance enhancing and then applying that to everyday people, because there is a huge difference between performance and health. So if the goal is to perform at your peak, which, it sounds good, you'd think, I want to do that. But no, because there are people out there who are willing to sacrifice their health to perform so they win. And that is so different to just you and me and everybody out there who's just, going about their everyday life, and they just want to live their glory years free of chronic disease.
That's right. And what is good for athletic performance is not necessarily good for health. Like an extreme example of that is bodybuilding. Bodybuilders at that elite level, bodybuilders, they do lots of things that are unhealthy, that they know are unhealthy. They inject themselves with insulin. They inject themselves with anabolic steroids. They do things that they literally know is going to decrease their lifespan, that's going to increase their chances of getting, cardiac problems later in life. And they choose to do this because it enhances their, bodybuilding performance. They're adults. They're allowed to do whatever they want, but this is what they do. But if people try and emulate that, or even just emulate aspects of that, you can see how it's not necessarily going to be helpful or healthy.
Absolutely. And to be honest, I don't even think it's that extreme anymore within that gym culture with young men. I see a couple of young men in the clinic, and it is part of a whole new sort of form of eating disorders, which we see, eating disorders are attributed traditionally to women and girls trying to be thin and small. This is like young men trying to be big and lean and buffed and sculptured and chiseled and and they are doing all sorts of things, emulating these bodybuilders with under the counter, cloak and dagger access to steroids and all sorts of things. It's mind-boggling.
It is. I work with a lot of eating disorder patients at Headspace, and we have dubbed this bigorexia. And it is something that we are having to rapidly get our heads around to help these men, because it's an increasing emerging problem.
Absolutely. So summary of that is that health and performance are separate. Not only are they separate, they're sometimes competing, so that what people are doing to perform well actually impacts their health. And that's not just, things like bodybuilders. We see this with elite cyclists end up with osteoporosis when they're older. Ballerinas end up with osteoporosis, related to often eating disorders. Contact sports people, of course, people will be aware of emerging head injuries and the sequelae of that. And all of these performance-enhancing things are stealing the glory years. We're always banging on about that. We want people to enjoy their glory years, that you've worked hard, that when you're entering the last third of your life, that this is where you should be, you're free of responsibility. You should be able to gallivant around. It's pretty hard to do if you've had, 3 hip fractures and you've now got post-concussion dementia.
That's right. I get extremely weary of broad sweeping, blanket advice. And you'll see people on the internet say this, all women should eat before exercise and should eat again immediately after exercise. I think that these broad reaching statements are potentially harmful because they don't take into account your own goals and your own metabolism. I mean, if you are choosing to engage in some movement and some strength training, what are your goals? Is your goals to be well, to be strong, to avoid chronic disease, to move better, to lose weight? Or are your goals to increase your performance at a competitive level? Really, and that's an important question to ask, because, whether or not you decide to eat processed protein, shakes immediately post-workout, you need to know the answer to that question. And I think it might be pretty obvious to the listeners here that if you are really interested in metabolic health and just being healthy, then you definitely don't need to follow that gym bro advice. It's actually perfectly okay to not eat before exercise, to not eat after exercise, and certainly okay to not have processed shakes after exercise. That is perfectly healthy and indeed probably quite a helpful choice. You've just got to tailor it to you.
Obviously, some of this advice comes from Stacey Sims, who's a current and very well-renowned exercise scientist. But her role is in, again, performance. And so that's really important to distinguish that. She helps athletes perform. We also know that there was a study, an old study now, right back in 2012, around chocolate milk as the perfect post-recovery drink. And I guess, on one level, part of me thinks, oh, well, chocolate milk, at least, it's actually less processed than some of the shakes. But if you're a woman in let's say you're 55 and you're maybe doing some strength training at the gym to support your metabolic health. And yes, obviously you're wanting to get a bit stronger. That's the whole point of going, but you're not about to enter the local body sculpting competition in your teeny tiny bikini. Then, do you need to have chocolate milk or a protein shake post workout?
No, you don't. And I reckon we could dive just a little bit into the science. I know we've talked about fasting recently, but just to explain why you don't, I think it can be quite helpful. So as we've mentioned before, when you're in the fasted state, so, you and I know that fasting is it's a short, sharp break from food. We balance periods of intermittent fasting with periods of nourishing our body really well. And when you're in that period of fasting, your insulin is low, so you've got beautiful access to your fat stores, you're more insulin sensitive, you've got more growth hormone, which means that your body is prone to grow more muscle and support your muscle and preserve your lean muscle mass. All these beautiful things are happening. And then if you exercise, you can actually kind of amplify some of those benefits. You can easy access to that fat storage because growth hormone is nice and high. Your muscles can repair really quite easily. And you can absolutely exercise safely in a fasted state, grow muscle in a fasted state. Obviously, you need to hydrate yourself, but it's a perfectly safe thing to do. You can also choose to eat if you want to as well. And I mean, a few different things happen when you're in that. If you choose to exercise when you're not in the fasted state, you don't get that added benefit, that sort of amplified effect of the fasting. But when we move our muscles, we get little micro tears in the muscles, and then that triggers all of these metabolic cascades in our muscles, which mean our muscles are primed to recover and to grow back bigger. And our bodies do enter what's called this anabolic window after strength training, after those little micro tears. And if your body has some protein in the few hours after that, then a little bit more extra amino acids building blocks of protein do get into those protein, and they can build back a little bit bigger than they would perhaps if you didn't have that protein. But doesn't necessarily mean that they're stronger. It just means that they're bigger. And look, this may have a little nuanced effect if, like I said, you want to be a bodybuilder or, you're entering some, strongman competition, strong woman competition. But in terms of your metabolic health, your weight loss, your overall well-being, actually doesn't make that much difference. Both can be beneficial and you can do either. And it really is kind of up to you and what feels best for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is the other thing is that, again, broad statements like, after exercise, you should have a protein shake. It depends on what your exercise is as well. Like if you've done 80-kilometer bike ride and you're a bit dehydrated, then we know that obviously supplementing your, rehydrating with water or electrolytes or sometimes even milk can be helpful. We know that, if your exercise is a 10-minute HIIT session, like exercises, they're not all created equal. And so to then suggest an equal intervention post exercise is, again, it's not very nuanced. So I like what you're saying, Mez, is that you can also just do what we often recommend, which is your own experiment. See, you can decide if you finish your exercise and you feel absolutely knackered and you feel like you haven't got any energy and you eat something and you feel better. Okay, well, you've got your answer. Some people finish exercise and don't want to eat. Their brains, their bodies, they've lost their appetites down. They've actually got upregulated all their fat-burning enzymes, so they're burning fat for fuel. They're clear-headed. They feel great. They go good. They just need to make sure that they've had plenty of electrolytes and water, and they're fine. So, again, for health, we want, at the end of the day, we want to do things that reduce our insulin resistance or increase insulin sensitivity, the same thing. And we do this by, again, lots of ways, but the way we think that is proven, lots of evidence around it, is to reduce your carbohydrates globally. Doesn't mean none. Okay, they're not no carbs. We're not cutting out a whole food group. We're just reducing them. Because honestly, the world eats tons of carbohydrate, and that's not always helpful, depending on your baseline levels of insulin resistance. And that's the whole point, is that what you do for a person who's insulin resistant and what you do for a person who isn't are completely different.
Yes. You could summarize it by saying that there are those absolute fundamentals to good metabolic health that you have to have keyed in, of which, movement is one. And there are benefits to doing your exercise in a fasted state, and there are also benefits to eating some protein in the few hours after exercise. But it doesn't have to be, immediately 30 minutes. That anabolic window continues for hours. And it doesn't have to be a processed shake. It can be real food, like real food high in protein. So some, healthy fasting is beneficial. Healthy exercise is beneficial. Eating low carb real food with a good amount of protein is beneficial. Different combinations of these on the same days are also beneficial. But you don't have to get bogged down in, musts and shoulds and nuances. You can decide what works for you. And as long as those basics are down, it's going to be beneficial. Differently beneficial, sure, but still beneficial.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, we've got plenty of time from the gym to go home. You can make yourself a cheese omelette. There'll be 30 grams of protein in that. If you have enough eggs and enough cheese in it, you can have a tuna salad. Like, there's tons of different ways to get your protein. We don't need to have it, zoomed up in a hyper processed shake. Again, if you want to, and that suits you in your busy life, then, no judgment from us. But what we're just saying is that you don't have to. You don't have to do that. Like, that's not the only way. So I think reminding yourself of your goals and recognizing that translating research that is done on athletes for performance does not necessarily equate to health.
Yes. Perfect.
All right, lovelies. That's it for then. A little short, sharp. You be your own boss, do your own experiments. As always, the fundamentals of good health, they can't be replaced in a packet. Real food is the king. The king, the queen, the prince, the princess, the duke, the duchess of good health.
Bye now, guys.
Bye now. The information shared on the Real Health and Weight Loss podcast, including show notes and links, provides general information only. It is not a substitute, nor is it intended to provide individualized medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, nor can it be construed as such. Please consult your doctor for any medical concerns.